U-530 had bunks for 28 men. When she surfaced off Argentina 2 months after Germany surrendered, she was carrying 54. She'd sailed more than 7,000 miles from home. Her green paint had chipped away, rust was spreading across the hull, and the sailors climbing out of the hatch were pale from weeks underwater. And yet, as they emerged, they greeted the Argentinians on shore with a proud Nazi salute. These were not defeated men. Among the pack was a skinny seaman whose uniform looked too big for him. He couldn't be older than 25. None of the locals in Mar del Plata understood his German, but eventually they picked up some of what he was saying. His name was Otto Wermuth, Oberlieutenant from submarine U-530. The Argentinians looked at each other with suspicious eyes. Could someone this young really have commanded one of the last U-boats out of the collapsing Nazi Empire? Or had the real commander vanished somewhere along the way? As officers boarded the submarine, looking for answers, nearly everything seemed out of place. The stands that once held machine guns were now empty. The only torpedo left on board was completely unusable, and the radar's operating equipment was nowhere to be found. At some point, the crew must have received the order to throw any valuable tools overboard. Even stranger, the space was so cramped that there wasn't even enough room to hang hammocks for all the sailors found inside. An intelligence report from the Navy notes, quote, "This led to suspicion that some men may have belonged to another submarine." Any navigational charts that might have helped the Argentinians figure out where the U-boat had picked up these additional passengers had disappeared, and whenever officers tried to question Lieutenant Wermuth about his boat's whereabouts before reaching South America, he kept his answers vague. The Third Reich had fallen. As far as anyone knew, there was no one left for Wermuth to protect. Still, whenever his interrogators tried to pressure him into a confession, he offered only an unlikely story. Crew and commander of U-530 all seemed desperate to hide something, or someone. Lieutenant Otto Wermuth struggled to explain how his submarine had ended up in Argentina. According to him, his submarine had sailed off from Norway in early March. The mission was to take U-530 to the American West Coast. From here, the crew was to hunt for any convoys unlucky enough to cross his path. However, before the submarine could score a single victory, the young lieutenant received the message no Nazi sailor wished to hear.
I'll repeat that. The formal announcement has not yet been made, but the official says that Germany has surrendered unconditionally to America, Britain, and Russia.
Germany had just surrendered, and all U-boats were to cease hostilities immediately. Wermuth was to head to the nearest United Nations port to hand his prize submarine to the enemy. But the lieutenant couldn't accept this. After years of war at sea, Wermuth had grown paranoid. Surely the Allies were trying to lure him into a trap. Germany couldn't be lost. The Americans must have been feeding his radio system false information about a supposed defeat. They wanted him to give up his submarine without a proper fight. But he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Carrying out his patrol as if nothing had happened was too risky. Now his best option was to set sail south toward Argentina. The nation had remained neutral throughout the war, and many local authorities were sympathetic to the Nazi cause. His crew would be safe there until he could figure out his next move. Wermuth insisted that at no point during his journey did he stop to board new passengers or drop off anyone. Instead, he held a steady course toward South America, completely unaware that by the time he arrived in Argentina, the country would have already declared war on Germany, leaving him no option but to surrender. It was not a bad alibi, but his interrogators were not quite convinced. U-530 was capable of speeds up to 18 knots on the surface. Even accounting for fuel conservation and long periods submerged to avoid Allied aircraft, investigators struggled to explain why the voyage to Argentina had taken nearly 2 months, especially since the submarine was already sailing along the American coast. One Navy report even noted, quote, "There appears to be no reason why the sub could not have returned to a European port before coming to Argentina and have brought passengers. Leaving the suspicious time gap aside, there was another pressing question that Wermuth couldn't quite answer. Why didn't he or any of his crew carry any identification that confirmed they were who they claimed to be? Rumors claimed that as early as 1944, the Nazis had begun building a secret network to smuggle Reich officials out of Europe. American intelligence even gave it a name: the Organization of Former SS Members, or Odessa. Most dismissed it as a myth, but the more investigators examined U-530's voyage, the more Otto Wermuth seemed connected to it. By the end of the war, the ocean was heavily patrolled by Allied aircraft seeking any remaining German vessels. Mechanical issues and exhausted crews had paralyzed the Kriegsmarine. Yet somehow, U-530 had managed to avoid detection for months. This had all the hallmarks of a coordinated escape operation, unfolding during the final collapse of the Third Reich. But whenever interrogators asked whether the lieutenant had been working with other boats, he remained firm. He was not aware of any other submarines bound for South America. However, before Wermuth was dismissed, he turned to the Argentinians and made one more statement. If other German submarines were indeed coming, they would arrive within the week. Officers couldn't understand what had prompted Wermuth to say it. Was it a warning? Or was he only trying to throw them off the scent of something bigger? The rest of the crew did not provide any more clarity. Their stories were virtually the same, leading interrogators to believe someone had instructed them on exactly what to say, and that they were hiding at least some details of their journey to Argentina. Officials were about to give up the case. A memorandum from the Miami Air Technical Service Command, dated August 3, 1945, rekindled the theory. According to the document, 4 German prisoners of war held at Belhaven Camp near Miami were overheard as they discussed, quote, the captain of the German sub, which had been captured recently off the coast of Argentina. Unaware that the Americans were taking note of their conversation, the Germans revealed that 8 more submarines were already patrolling off the coast of Argentina, being refueled and resupplied by local allies. This was just what officers needed to prove that not only had U-530 been carrying out a secret mission, but also that it had not been working alone. Eventually, the sailors of U-530 began to talk. It was true. During their trip to Argentina, the crew had received word that at least 3 other U-boats were on their way to America. They refused to give much more details, but it was obvious that Wermuth had been lying all along. He was probably aware that Germany had lost the war and that sailors were fleeing. His radio was in working condition, so he likely also knew that Argentina had declared war on them. And landing on their shore would result in his vessel and his crew being seized and sent to America. Still, he had chosen to do it. Perhaps because he wasn't really surrendering, but rather carrying out one last vital mission for the Reich. For days before U-530 officially surfaced at Mar del Plata, there were accounts of fishermen along the Argentine coast seeing a submarine prowling offshore. One official report places the vessel near the area on July 9th, a full day before Otto Wermuth finally surrendered his boat. Other locals later insisted that the submarine had been lingering around the area for nearly a week. No one could confirm the sightings were truly U-530, but if they were, it meant Wermuth had reached Argentina long before he cared to admit. In a declassified FBI report from August 1945, an anonymous informant listed as Source Z states, quote, on June 28th, submarine surfaced off Santa Cruz near San Julian, landing 2 unidentified persons, one a very high-ranking army officer and the other an important civilian, possibly a woman. Other sources report similar incidents, stating that a man in uniform and a woman were dropped off in a rubber boat near Schroeder, not far from where U-530 surfaced in Mar del Plata. The FBI doesn't identify who these obscure figures could have been, but over time, whispers would spread, claiming they were none other than the Führer himself and his wife, Eva Braun, brought to Argentina aboard U-530. At least one source in the FBI report seems to support this theory, a German referred to as Arturo Meyer. The agency does not provide details on how they came upon this informant or the exact role he had in either Germany or Argentina. However, his allegations were serious enough for the agency to formally document them in its report. According to Meyer, Hitler had survived the collapse of the Third Reich by being flown into Africa. From here, he was then picked up by U-530 and transported to Argentina. Upon arrival, the plan was for Hitler to pass as a fisherman before a group of Germans and Argentinian officials arrived to take him to his final destination, which could explain why the submarine was allegedly seen sailing close to a group of local fishermen on July 9th. It's unclear if once Hitler was retrieved, he would be taken to a hiding place in Argentina, Paraguay, or Brazil. However, Meyer's statement suggests that to avoid detection wherever he ended up, his face was modified through plastic surgery. Lieutenant Wermuth denied this, of course, but when another submarine surfaced just over a month later, his case didn't look good. U-977 arrived in Argentina on August 17, 1945, sparking even more conspiracy theories. Her commander, Oberlieutenant Zursay Heinz Schaefer, claimed he had only come here to surrender, but for many, this was the final piece of the puzzle. Now, many Allied officials were convinced that the Nazis had indeed been carrying out a secret naval evacuation. They weren't wrong. In the following decades, investigations proved that several high-ranking Nazis, including Adolf Eichmann, did escape to Argentina with fake documents. But whether some of them did it on board a U-boat, such as U-530 or U-977, remains unconfirmed. Some analysts have noted that at the time, Argentina lacked the necessary port infrastructure to support the refueling of submarines arriving on its shores, casting doubt on the theory that these boats could have sustained long, secret operations along the coast. Still, even today, no one can state with total confidence what U-530 was carrying to Argentina, or where exactly she was navigating before her surrender. And while some remain doubtful that this was the submarine that helped the Führer flee, theories still abound. Because if Hitler, or another senior Nazi, had attempted one final escape from Europe, this would have seemed like the perfect vessel to do it. The submarine arrived in Argentina with no clear explanation of where it had been, missing equipment, and no crew identifications.